Carol Martine. So happy that you could join me today in my studio when I'm working on my yellow orchids that we have already sketched. And as you know, this project is just for me. We've practiced our sketching already, and I have taken a little bit of time before I began recording so that you would not we would not have to take time away from because this is all very basic. I'll talk about that in a moment. I have my water supply, my palettes, my photo, my paints, which I have spritzed with spray of water to get my yellows juicy. I might need other colors as we go along, but I'll attend to that later. And my three favorite brushes, my old Winsor Newton 6 round, my number 4 liner, and another liner. This time it doesn't want me to know what number it is. I guess it's just been covered up with some paint and wear. So what I have done thus far is I've taken some of my very lightest yellow, put it in my palette, made it nice and juicy, and that's seriously juicy, and then I went over each of the petal areas so that I laid in some of my yellow coloring. In other words, I just very sketchily and quickly laid on some yellow on my petals. I then took some of that same yellow and a little bit of a heavier concentration and worked on adding some of the suggestions of where it would be darker using that same yellow. Alrighty, now this is a center, so I'm going to lay in some of my dark yellow here. Just a suggestion about where that's going to be. I'm going to work, I believe, on this flower. I'm going to work in the center area and on some of these surrounding petal areas. And I'm going to be working on this petal, this center, this under petal, and probably on this one. And since essentially everything that I'm going to be doing in this area will be worked the same way over here, I'm going to do part of that off camera and then probably come back and work in this area and down in here on this flower. So this is our lightest yellow, and I can see that I'm going to need more shades of yellow over here. So I'm going to my palette to find my deeper yellows, and I'm even going to add a little of this ochre yellow right here in case I need it, and I think possibly that I'm going to be needing it. And then we'll think about exactly what color we're going to use in the center area here. So I'm going to start at the top back of this top petal right here, and we have a front area on that one. So I'm going to start on the back now, and remember that we can always build up, but it's very difficult to take away with watercolor, so that's why I have my Viva in hand. And our darkness down here. Now I'm going to add a little water to let that watercolor happen. Now that sharpened up this edge a bit, so I'm going to go over here and put that coloration right along here. A little more of this in this area, and just put on some almost clear water and see the difference that we have achieved just by doing that. Alrighty, going to come in a little bit closer. There we go. So I think we'll leave that alone. No, I have an urge to put just a little bit more of the ochre now that I'm not too afraid of it. Put just a little bit more of that down in here. And come around the edge over here. Right, we'll let that settle in. I'm going to go now to this one. That's quite a dark one. I think we're definitely going to be using our ochre. Maybe lightened a little bit with this mid-range yellow. So let's get this one in here. Get my Viva handy. Just settling some water on there. Yes, I think that will be a good start. Now this is kind of light again, so I'm going to go back to this mid-range yellow. Put some of that on here and some of that down here. Right. You'll notice I'm just going to the edge of the color I just applied so as to let it run a little bit, and as I say, do its watercolor best. Now I believe that the background color on this one is a darker shade, so let me go and darken that up a little bit down here in the throat area. Alrighty. So that will be our start. I'm going to put some of our very light background yellow here as my water source, which will permit this to flow out more evenly, or not, whichever the watercolor decides it wants to do today. Alrighty, so let's talk now to these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to put some more of this mid-range yellow back here, but if you will notice there is some definite lightness, so I'm going to leave that area, the background yellow, and I'm just going to put on some of that yellow and a little bit more of it over here. With a little bit of an opportunity to run, but not too much. I want to be in control of that area. If you will notice the dark color, we're going to go back to our ochre. And if it runs, because it's the tendency of watercolor to run into a wet place, that will be fine. In this case, particularly, it will soften these lines. And we're not going to be unhappy with that at all. Not too tickled with this area. It looks like a bullseye. So if I add some water to it, I can lighten it up, but leave a little white, which is, of course, the paper showing through. I'm going to swing around now to this one. Now this one, I'm going to go again to my mid-range. I'm going to go into my mid-range yellow. I keep leaving you, don't I? I must pay better attention to my monitor. Alrighty, now I'm going to go back to my mid-range, make some more juicy color. There we go. Let me come back just a little bit so that you can see it all. Okay, here we go. Alrighty. Now we're working on this one. Let's get some darker yellow up in here. And since this is under that center, it'll be darker at this end. Yes, it is. And then we're going to let it come down over here a little bit. And maybe just a titch, because after all, this is our orchid. Mustn't forget that. Now, mostly just water that I've dabbed on my Viva to let this happen. And just a little bit more darkness right up in here with just a dot of our ochre. Right, we'll leave that one. Now we'll come over to this one right here. And I noticed that right in here, this is underneath. So I'm going to work it all around underneath that center area and underneath this folded petal. A little bit of our mid-range color added to it out here. And some water in the center. And we'll leave that one alone for the moment. Since I'm starting up this side, I'm going to work on that one. And oh my, isn't that a nice dark one? So, let's go with mid-range again. And this is behind the center, but it is not that dark. So we almost have a halo all around this petal. So let's put that in. We can always darken it, but we certainly can't lighten it unless we tap, tap, tap with our Viva. Now, I'm going to let that sit for a moment till I decide how we're going to make these darker shades. I think there's more to this one and there. Now that I see it, there's more color in there than we have, and that's just fine. A little blossoming here. I'll work it out with some water. Alrighty, now I'm wondering if one of these yellows, let's think about mid-range, mixed with some of our ochre, okay, mixed with some of our ochre, and maybe a tiniest touch of the little tiniest touch possible of red. Yes, maybe a red orangey color. Whoops. Whoops. Well, maybe. Maybe. No. Now, if I want to tone those two colors down, if you know your color wheel, we're going to have to go over to one of our purples, and I'm going to go over to True Purple and put just the tiniest dab on my palette right here to talk that down a little bit. And look what it does to it. Let's see. Let us see. Okay. And I'm going to lay this down because I'm going to have my Viva ready to go. And I can lift a little of that until I see whether it might need more, because we can always add. It's the taking away that can be difficult. Let's put a little bit more on there now and let it dry, because you know it will dry light. So try to put it on in the shape of a petal. Not too tickled the way it looks kind of like a blob, so let's see what we can go back to our yellow and pull it up back into it, and let's see if we can get rid of some of that blobby effect. Yes, that's better. All right, and we need some more of that darkness down here, and since it's in the corner here, I'm not going to be too unhappy about putting it in right here. It almost looks as though we've made a darker shade of ochre for that, haven't we? Okay, and I think we need to come back to mid-range yellow and bring that down in. Alrighty. Now the other part of that is pretty clear cut. Alrighty, now I do believe just might be starting to be able to think orchid here. Alrighty. Coming back up to this section, and I'm seeing that we might need a bit more around the outside of this one. Yes, yes, and some down here. Now I'm going to talk to this one again. Add a little bit more of that little touch of red and a little dab of our purple, and get that down in here. Oh yes. I'm going to go back to this section because the paper is still a little bit damp. And still a little bit damp right here. Just a little bit of water at the edge to decide whether or not it wants to do something there. And a little bit more of that nice darkness that we're now plunging into here. First time we came at this with a little bit of fear in our hearts, and now we're realizing how necessary this dark is in here. Alrighty. Now, we need to make some more dark. So, let's have some ochre at hand. Some of this red-orange. It looks so violent the first time that I put it down. And we've used up our purple. Here we go. You notice the purple grays that down nicely. So we have some of our darkness here. And some more in this area. Now I have to admit this is my very favorite thing to be doing. Now, we have some definitely got to put some of that dark way down in here. And around this shape, right here. And into this shape so that it will remain light. Okay, let's have a little more. And some of this darker yellow right here around the cupped area. And a little bit more of that darker yellow right in this area. Okay, now let's come back with some of this in here and between these two dark areas and up in here, maybe a little bit on the tip. Now we have the changes that occur as the watercolor spreads and does its thing and dries, and we've lost some darkness right here, so let's have it back in there. Alrighty, let's have it back in here. Let's have it back in here. Almost purple, straight purple I added to that one to keep that darkness. And in here to keep that darkness alive. Oops. Look at that little, look at that one right there. And up here. Darkness with some purple. Alrighty. Just a little bit of water on the outside. Now you'll notice that I've been monkeying about here, kind of putting that need for deciding about this color. I'm wondering if we're not going to have to try to discover this. Let's assume that it should have some yellow in here. So we'll use our mid-range. thinking I might want to try a little sienna. All right. And some of that red we used before. Let's see what we can make here. Well, it's okay, but it's not dark enough. How about some red? Will that help? Let's try a little bit of blue. Maybe that will help darken things up a little bit. Whoops, nope, that turns it brown or gray. No, we don't like that. Some more yellow. More of the red. It's just turning it into orange. Go back for a little bit more sienna. Oh yes, that might be just the ticket. Oops, that might be just the ticket. Let's see what happens. More. Well, let's test. Let's test by doing my fine liner. No, you know that needs a little more. Let's see. Oops, needs more red. Finding a color can be a fun job, but a job nonetheless. Let's see what happens now. Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes, yes, yes. And up and around. Remember, this is our orchid, so we are not trying to make a photocopy here. Now let's see what we have here. I'm sorry. I completely forgot where I was and what I was supposed to be doing and saying, because that's what playing with my watercolors does to me. I get into a different realm completely, which I imagine is a very good thing. Well, not too far off. Not too far off. I think I'll work on this one for a bit. And then, oops, look what we have here. Mine is a little stronger than the photo. So I'm going to add a little bit of water here to help me tone that down a bit, but not too much because I like mine. And we should have something over there, more in the brown family. So let's go over to this brown that we made. And put it over here. So, I need more oomph in my very light yellow. So, I'm going back to it, put some water on here, it'll reconstitute nicely. And I need to get some of this to be a little yellower. So let's go there now. Then I'm going to go back for one more visit on our dark over there, add a little bit more red to this. You'll notice what the water has done here. It has moved and made a very pleasant gradation of color. Maybe a little bit more down in here. It'll keep doing that happy thing. I will be very, very tickled. This has just the finest amount of that little darkness, or that shadowing. So I'm going to add it with, of all things, my liner brush, but it seems to be working to do the job. And I'm seeing just a hint in the photo. So I'm going to put it there. I'm going to soften this edge a little bit, or try to, not too much. So let's go back now to this color that we made. And we found that adding the red did what we wanted it to do. So, just a bit more width and strength in here, with a tad more of that nice dark brown. Oh yes, that was the trick. I remember now. Don't I just see, now that I'm really taking some time to look, don't I just see some bits of pollen down here? Alrighty. And just a bit of this strong yellow that's left around here. Well, I'm going to work on this now, finish it up, and I will show you our finished orchid. I'll be back. Well, I'm back, and I've decided that we are now going to put on the absolutely palest shade of mauve or purple that we can manage as our background. I have finished my centers. I have looked more closely at the original, and at this point I've decided that's my orchid. Learning to stop can be quite the trick. So I'm going to go back to my dead-on purple. Lighten it, lighten it, lighten it. Put just a touch of the yellow in it that we have been using. And I've decided that this shade should do a treat. So I'm sure that this is dry. If you will remember, we're going to wet the paper, and in this case, our rinse water might just become our color of choice. Because I'm a firm believer in not fixing what isn't broken. Alrighty. Make sure that we have our paper wet, but not sopping, no puddles, just the slightest shine, so that when I get around, the shine should be pale down enough that I can add a little tiny bit more color. Although having that dab of purple in my rinse water, as you can see, is making this job much easier. And I can keep the purple out of our orchids. We shouldn't have any difficulty with that. Let's see if I can't work this line out, this original purple line, which was supposed to be just clear water. I think not. Righty, now make sure that I have water applied all around, and this side is still too wet to work. So let's go back over here and add the absolute slightest bit of our purple. Goodness, I wanted just a hint of violet, and I certainly managed it. I must again have been holding my mouth right. Yes, so far so good. Paper's buckling a bit more than it had before, probably because it's a smidge too, well, there's another art word, smidge, a smidge too wet. And the last little bit. dry this. Yes, just the palest hint of purple. Turn off the video so that you don't need to hear me do this, but I will dry the front and the back. Because of the quality of this paper, it will flatten itself out if I dry both sides, which I will do. So here we are with our finished and dried project. I hope you have enjoyed watching this process. If you have enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, which I certainly appreciate, share, and certainly please subscribe to my channel. I'm quite comfortable with the job I've done. I'm keeping the imp at bay. There are things that I see that I could do, add to, wish I could take away, but that's not going to happen. It's over. I'm going to sign this now and date it, and I'll be back next week with our next project, which is hydrangea florets and negative painting. Bye for now.